In the heart of the forgotten town of Darrington, shrouded in mist and mystery, lies a library no one dares speak of. Not because of what's inside, but because of what never left. The Darrington Library, abandoned since 1974 after a series of unexplained disappearances, has become the stuff of whispered nightmares. But what if I told you that the truth was far more terrifying than the tales? What if the walls remembered every scream? What if the shelves whispered secrets not meant for human ears? And what if someone, foolish or brave, dared to open its creaking doors again? The Haunted Library, Whispers Between the Shelves, is not just a story. It's a descent into madness, fear, and a reality distorted by the horrors that lurk just beyond the veil of reason. This isn't your average ghost tale. It's a psychological maze riddled with hallucinations, secrets, ancient forces, and unspeakable horrors that hunger for your soul. So here's a question for you. Would you dare walk between those shelves alone, even if something was whispering your name from the darkness? Let us know in the comments below if you'd enter the haunted library, and why. Your answer might just decide your fate. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you're ready to unlock this terrifying mystery. This is just the beginning. And remember, some stories are best left unread. The rain came down in sheets as Jeremy Locke stepped off the creaking Greyhound bus, boots hitting the soaked pavement with a dull splash. Darrington was smaller than he'd imagined, the kind of town that looked like it had forgotten how to wake up. Fog curled through the narrow streets like ghostly fingers, and every building wore a face of age and secrecy. He adjusted the strap of his leather satchel and started toward the heart of town. He wasn't here by accident. No, Jeremy had spent the last 5 years chasing unsolved urban legends for his paranormal podcast, Ghost Frequency. The Darrington Library was next on his list, and the one that haunted his own dreams the longest. The legend was chilling. A town librarian, Margaret Elwood, was last seen locking the grand oak doors of the library one evening in the fall of '74. She never came out. Neither did the 4 college students who entered 3 weeks later with cameras and curiosity. The building was sealed shortly after, declared structurally unsound. But everyone knew that was a lie. No one had gone in since. But Jeremy? He planned to be the first. He found the library at the edge of the town square, half swallowed by ivy, its windows darkened by decades of dust and grime. The carved stone sign above the door still read, Darrington Public Library, founded 1892. As he approached, a sharp gust of wind tugged at his coat. The trees whispered above him, their bare branches scratching the sky. He paused at the door, which loomed tall and unforgiving. The padlock was ancient, rusted, but with a little effort, the bolt snapped open with a reluctant click. As he pushed the door open, the hinges groaned like a dying thing. A wave of icy air spilled out from the darkness, making him flinch. The scent hit him next. Mildew, rotting paper, and something faintly metallic, like old blood. Jeremy clicked on his flashlight. The beam revealed a grand foyer, its once polished marble floor cracked and littered with debris. Shelves loomed like skeletons in the dimness, some collapsed, others still eerily intact. Dust motes danced like spirits in the air. At the center stood the front desk, still cluttered with yellowing paper, and behind it, a spiral staircase curled up into shadow. He lifted his camera, documenting every corner for his podcast audience. "This is Jeremy Locke, Ghost Frequency," he whispered, "inside the infamous Darrington Library, unentered for 50 years. Let's find out what really happened." He walked deeper inside, the sound of his footsteps muffled by the thick dust. The silence was oppressive, not the quiet of emptiness, but the kind that felt listening. As he passed the first aisle of bookshelves, he thought he heard a faint rustle. He froze. His flashlight flicked across the shelves. Nothing. Maybe just a rat, he reasoned. He took out his EMF reader, switched it on, and watched the needle twitch. A moment later, it spiked hard. Jeremy frowned. "Electromagnetic disturbance. Right here." He took a cautious step forward. The spike vanished. The air suddenly felt thick, like breathing underwater. Then the whisper came, software, low, a breath more than a word. Jeremy. He spun around, heart pounding. The beam of his flashlight caught nothing but the long hallway behind him. Shelves to the left and right stood silent. He rubbed his temples. Did I just imagine that? He pressed forward, reaching a reading room lined with stained glass windows. Chairs were still pushed back from tables, as if someone had just risen moments ago. Books lay open, pages yellow and curling. He bent to pick one up, a leather-bound copy of the Inferno. As his fingers touched it, a jolt shot through his hand. He stumbled back, dropping the book, breathing hard. Behind him, the whisper came again, clearer now. Why did you come? Jeremy spun, his flashlight catching a shape ducking behind a bookshelf. He chased after it, turning sharply into the next aisle. Nothing. Empty. He laughed nervously, voice shaking. If this is a prank, it's a damn good one. Suddenly, all the books on the shelves to his left exploded outward, flying at him with unnatural force. He raised his arms, stumbling backward as tomes slammed into his chest and shoulders. He fell hard, flashlight tumbling from his grip. The world plunged into darkness. Silence. His breath came in ragged gasps. He scrambled for the flashlight, hands trembling. When he clicked it back on, he found himself lying in a different room. He blinked. The floor was no longer marble but carpeted. The bookshelves were pristine, clean. The lights above glowed softly. It was like he'd traveled 50 years into the past. What the? He whispered. Voices echoed through the room. Soft conversation, the turning of pages, a bell ringing for closing time. He turned to see a librarian behind the desk, tall, pale, with silver hair pulled tight into a bun. She looked directly at him. Can I help you find something? She asked. Jeremy opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The scene around him wavered, a ripple through time, and then he was back in the decaying room, alone again. The lights above him flickered and died. His heart thundered. He clutched his chest, sweat drenching his back. That wasn't real, he whispered. That couldn't have been real. A creak echoed from the second floor. Jeremy turned, staring at the spiral staircase. Another creak. Something was up there. He steadied himself and began the climb, every step screaming beneath his weight. Dust floated in the beam of his flashlight. Halfway up, he saw a handprint, smeared across the metal railing in dark red. Not old. Fresh. His breath caught in his throat. At the top of the staircase was a narrow corridor lined with portraits. The faces in the frames were all wrong. Blurred, twisted, some with hollow sockets where eyes should be. He passed them quickly, trying not to look. At the end of the hallway was a reading room, this one more intimate, with a fireplace long gone cold. In the center stood a table. On it lay a tape recorder. Jeremy slowly approached it. The device clicked on by itself. They're still here, a woman's voice whispered from the tape. The shelves remember. Don't read the names. Don't listen to the whispers. The tape stopped. And then, footsteps behind him. He turned, light trembling in his grip. But the room was empty, except for the shadows, which moved. Jeremy stood frozen, breath caught halfway in his chest. The flashlight trembled in his grip, casting erratic beams that danced across the walls. The shadows swayed unnaturally, not in time with the light, not in rhythm with his movement. They seemed to breathe. Then one of them detached. It pulled itself from the corner, stretching like black smoke peeling off flesh. It slithered up the wall, across the ceiling, and dropped soundlessly into the hallway behind him. Jeremy bolted. Down the spiral staircase he ran, skipping steps, stumbling, barely catching himself as he slammed into the ground floor. His lungs burned. Every sound around him was louder than it should be. The thud of his boots, the rasp of his breath, the whispering. The whispering wouldn't stop. You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be here. Turn back. It came from the shelves, from the floorboards, from inside his own mind. He clutched his skull, staggering toward the exit. He'd had enough. Maybe he'd come back later, with backup. Maybe not at all. As he reached the main door and yanked it, a sickening realization froze his blood. It wouldn't open. He rattled it, slammed his shoulder into the frame. Nothing. The door stood firm as a vault. He turned the key in the padlock, but it refused to budge. It was as if the library had locked itself shut. Number no, 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 he whispered. A scream echoed from deep inside the library. High-pitched, human, female. It rang out again, blood-curdling, desperate, and then was cut off like a thread snapped mid-pull. Jeremy turned back, face pale and drawn. He had to find the source. Maybe someone else was trapped in here. Maybe this wasn't a ghost story. Maybe it was a crime scene. He crept down the side corridor, flashlight flickering as if fighting something unseen. His skin prickled. The air grew colder. Each step felt heavier than the last, like the floor itself resisted him. He turned the corner and stopped dead. A figure stood at the far end of the hall, just beyond the flickering edge of light. It was facing the wall, shoulders hunched. Long black hair, spilled down a torn dress. It wasn't moving. Jeremy raised his voice. "Hello? Are you hurt?" No response. He took a step forward. "I heard you scream. Are you—" The figure turned. Its face was gone. No eyes, no mouth. Just skin. Smooth, stretched too tightly. And it raised a hand and pointed at him. Jeremy stumbled back, panic flaring in his chest. The thing lunged, moving in flickers. Here, then closer, before vanishing in a burst of choking cold air. He fell to his knees, gasping, body trembling. It wasn't just haunted. This place was alive. It fed on fear. He scrambled to his feet and ducked into a small side room. The children's section, murals of cartoon animals peeled from the walls. Teddy bears lay abandoned on tiny chairs. Books with bright covers lay scattered across the floor. And there, in the middle of the room, sat a little girl. Jeremy stopped. She was maybe 8, dressed in a blue dress that looked decades out of fashion. Her blonde curls framed a pale face. She clutched a tattered picture book in her hands. When she looked up at him, her eyes weren't frightened. They were hollow. "I like stories," she said quietly. "Do you?" Jeremy hesitated. "Who are you?" She smiled, far too wide for her small face. "My name was Lila. I came here with my daddy." "What happened to him?" She turned a page of the book. The shelves whispered his name. Then they closed. Jeremy's throat tightened. "Lila, you're not real, are you?" She tilted her head. "Are you?" The lights in the room snapped off. When they flicked back on, just for a heartbeat, she was gone. He backed out of the room slowly, heart racing, every nerve screaming. He was unraveling. Reality itself was thinning. He had to focus. He returned to the foyer. The tape recorder still sat on the table. His hands hovered over it. Then he pressed play again. Static. Then a male voice, frantic, speaking in gasps. "This place, it knows you. It digs into your head. Don't read the books. Don't listen to them. They lie." Click. Jeremy stared at the shelves that towered around him. The books were humming now, vibrating faintly. One slid off a shelf and landed open at his feet. His name was written in it. Jeremy Locke, born 1989. Vanished April 2nd, 2025. Presumed dead, his blood iced over. Number, "No, I'm still alive," he said aloud. "I'm getting out of here." The walls groaned. A deep, pulsing sound echoed through the building, like a heartbeat. He ran, past the reading rooms, past the reference desk, down into the basement stairs, hoping, praying for an alternate exit. The basement was worse. It was a tomb. Dust coated the stairs like ash. The ceiling hung low, pipes exposed and dripping. The air was thick with mold and rot. Jeremy's flashlight flickered again, this time with purpose. It didn't want him to see what was coming. The beam settled on rows of archival shelves, and on the floor between them, bones. Dozens of them. Human. Picked clean. Arranged in careful patterns. Some still wore faded scraps of clothing. Among them, a camera. Old, cracked. A sticker on the side read, "Darrington College Paranormal Society, 1974. Jeremy picked it up with shaking hands. He pressed play. The screen lit up. Static. Then images. Young people laughing in the foyer, exploring the shelves, recording strange phenomena. Then screaming. The camera dropped. Figures dragged into shadows. A final frame. Margaret Elwood, the missing librarian, standing in front of the lens. Her eyes were black, her mouth opened too wide. Her voice was clear. "You shouldn't have come here." The footage cut to black. Jeremy dropped the camera, bile rising in his throat. And behind him, something breathed. Jeremy didn't turn around. He couldn't. His muscles locked, every instinct screaming that if he looked, if he acknowledged what was behind him, it would be real. But the breath on his neck grew colder, hungrier. It whispered into his ear without sound. A voice pressed into the marrow of his bones. His vision blurred as dizziness surged through him like a crashing wave. He fell to his knees. A hiss slithered into the air, like pages turning at high speed. And then, silence. He forced himself to look. Nothing. Just the rows of archival shelves and the camera, now dark. But the bones had shifted. Where once they had laid scattered, now they were arranged in a circle around him. Symbols had been etched into the floor in what looked like dried ink or blood. His own footprints led him into the center. None led out. Jeremy scrambled to his feet and sprinted up the stairs. He didn't stop until he slammed into the lobby wall, heart hammering, sweat cold against his back. The library groaned. The entire building shifted, walls warped, doorways twisted. The very architecture trembled like it was breathing. Like it had been pretending to be a library, but had now grown bored of the charade. The front door was gone. Where it had been was now another hallway, unfamiliar, narrow and lined with mirrors. Jeremy didn't want to enter, but he had no choice. There was no other way. The hallway stretched longer than the outside of the building could allow. Dozens of mirrors hung on either side, each one warped, distorted. As he walked, he noticed the reflections weren't right. They didn't match his movements. One mirror showed him standing still as he walked. Another showed him screaming silently, blood running from his eyes. A third showed nothing at all. No reflection, just the empty hallway behind him. He stopped before a full-length mirror at the far end. This one showed a perfectly clear version of himself. Too clear. Jeremy stared into his own eyes. And then the reflection smiled. He did not. It raised its hand. He didn't. It pointed behind him. Slowly, Jeremy turned his head. The hallway was empty. When he turned back, the mirror was cracked, the reflection gone. But something else had appeared on the glass, scrawled in something red and thick. "Find the whisper room." Jeremy's hand trembled as he touched the words. The surface of the glass was warm. He stepped back. The hallway behind him had changed. No mirrors, just a long corridor leading to a massive wooden door bound in iron. He hadn't seen it before. It hadn't been there. Every instinct told him to run the other way. But he knew that wouldn't help. Not here. Not in this place that chewed up reason and spat out horror. He pushed the door open. The room beyond was massive, impossibly so. Towering shelves spiraled upward into darkness. Thousands of books, thousands of whispers. A low hum vibrated through the air, as though every book was alive and murmuring. Jeremy stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind him. The temperature plummeted. His breath fogged. He took another step and felt something underfoot. Looking down, he saw the floor was covered in parchment. Loose, aged, covered in scribbles and names. His flashlight flickered, then died. The hum grew louder, now unmistakably voices. Whispering, chanting, laughing, crying. His ears rang. He dropped to one knee, clutching his head. "They're watching," a voice hissed inches from his ear. "Don't speak." He stumbled forward, deeper into the maze of shelves. Each one was lined with a specific type of book. Diaries, obituaries, journals, handwritten volumes with no titles. Each one bore a name. Then he saw it, a shelf labeled Lock J. His breath caught. He stepped closer. Dozens of identical books sat on the shelf, all bearing his name. The spines were dated, each day of his life chronicled in precise order. He pulled the last one off the shelf and opened it. It detailed everything. His podcasts, His journey to Darrington, every moment inside the library, including this one. He read, Jeremy turned the page. He turned it. Jeremy heard the footsteps. They began. He slammed the book shut and dropped it, backing away. The footsteps grew louder, uneven, dragging, like something pulling itself across broken glass. He ran, again, this time blindly. Left, right, deeper. The shelves narrowed. The books screamed now, silent but piercing in his head. He burst into an open space, a circular chamber at the heart of the whisper room. In the center stood a podium. On it rested a book unlike the others, bound in deep red leather, pulsing slightly with something like breath. It had no title, just a handprint on the cover. Jeremy approached, drawn to it like a moth to flame. He reached out, and the lights snapped on. Dozens of figures surrounded him, silent, motionless. Some were missing eyes, others mouths. Many wore the tattered remains of old clothing, some modern, some dated. Jeremy stumbled back. One of them stepped forward. It was the woman from the 1974 tape, Margaret Elwood. Her eyes glowed dimly. "You've been chosen," she said. "No," he rasped. "I didn't come here to stay. You read the book. I didn't finish it. You started it." She stepped closer, and her face cracked down the middle like shattered porcelain, revealing a black void beneath. "The library remembers you now." Jeremy turned to run, but every exit was gone. Only shelves. Endless, pulsing shelves. The whispering surged, now a roar, a storm inside his skull. His vision blurred. His hands bled from where his nails had dug into his palms. A shape emerged from the shadows. Not quite human, tall and thin with limbs that didn't bend properly. It had no face, just a stretched sheet of skin where features should be. It held a quill, and it moved toward him. Jeremy backed into the podium, knocking the red book to the floor. It flew open. The pages turned on their own, faster and faster, before stopping on a blank page. And then words began to etch themselves into the parchment. Jeremy Locke screamed. He opened his mouth, and the sound never came out. Jeremy's scream was stolen from his throat. It wasn't silence. It was theft. The sound of his terror was swallowed, pulled from him like breath through a vacuum. His mouth remained open, lips trembling, but no noise emerged. His lungs burned. Panic clawed at his mind as the faceless figure with the quill hovered closer. It didn't walk. It glided, as though it were suspended just above the floor. Every movement twitched with unnatural precision, and the quill it held dripped something dark, blacker than ink, more like shadow liquefied. Jeremy's legs reacted before his brain caught up. He spun and ran, shoulder checking a shelf, sending books tumbling. The screams from their pages were immediate, warped voices calling his name, hissing secrets, begging him to stop. He didn't. He didn't dare. As he tore through the whispering labyrinth, he saw glimpses of impossible things. A man in a World War II uniform hanging upside down in midair, reading a book with no pages. A woman walking in slow motion, covered in crawling text instead of skin. A child whispering into the spine of a book, and the book whispering back. Jeremy darted into a narrow passage and slammed into a ladder bolted to the side of a tall shelf. It led up into blackness. Without thinking, he grabbed the rungs and climbed. Anything to escape the thing below. Higher and higher, the air grew thinner, colder, and somehow deeper. When he reached the top, the world had changed again. He stood on a catwalk overlooking what appeared to be a massive pit, hundreds of feet deep. Bookshelves stretched along the inside like vertebrae, forming a circular descent into darkness. In the center, suspended by chains, was a glass chamber. Inside the chamber, something moved. Jeremy crept closer, leaning over the railing to get a better look. The chains groaned, swaying slightly with each creak. The glass was fogged from the inside, smeared with prints, handprints. Then the mist cleared just enough for him to see a face, his own. Jeremy stumbled back, gasping. Inside the chamber, his doppelganger stared back, blood running from his ears, eyes hollow, expression blank. The mouth moved slowly, shaping a word over and over. Wake. The catwalk shook violently. A deafening sound rang out, like steel being torn apart. Jeremy gripped the railing as the world spun. One of the chains snapped. The glass chamber jerked violently, now hanging at an angle. Then another chain gave. Jeremy had to move. He ran along the swaying catwalk as the chamber below shuddered and groaned. The final chain creaked ominously, stretched to its limit. Jeremy reached the far side just as the chamber snapped free and plummeted. The sound of shattering glass was endless. And then, silence. But not peace. A slow rumbling began to rise from the pit below. Books tumbled from the shelves into the black abyss. The shelves themselves began to collapse inward, dragged by some unseen force. Jeremy turned and bolted down another flight of iron stairs, taking them three at a time. The structure around him trembled with the force of a distant earthquake. Dust fell from above. A book exploded beside him, pages fluttering into shrieking moth-like shapes. As he reached the bottom, he found a heavy oak door, carved with runes and bound in what looked like barbed wire. A plaque above it read, "The Scribe's Room." He hesitated, then pushed it open. Inside, candlelight flickered over dozens of ancient desks. At each one sat a figure, pale, gaunt, barely alive. They scratched endlessly into parchment with bone quills, bleeding from their fingers with every stroke. Some wept silently. Others whispered as they wrote, their lips cracked and dry. None looked up. The sound of scratching filled the room, ceaseless, mechanical, a choir of desperation. One figure near the front suddenly jerked back from his desk and turned toward Jeremy. His eyes were wide, his lips sewn shut. He shoved the parchment he'd been writing on toward Jeremy. It read, "You are writing too." Jeremy looked down at his hands. He was holding a quill. The parchment before him had writing, his writing, line after line of it, things he didn't remember doing, phrases he didn't understand. But they were in his handwriting, his style, his mind. Then one line caught his eye. He looked up and saw them all turn to him. He looked up. Every scribe had stopped. Every head turned. Dozens of hollow, broken faces stared at him. And then as one, they rose. Jeremy backed away slowly. The first scribe stepped forward, arms trembling, fingers bleeding. He extended his quill like a knife. Jeremy ran. Out of the room, down another hallway, into a spiral staircase made of black stone. He didn't know if it led up or down, space twisted in the library. But he had to keep moving. The steps stretched for what felt like miles. And then, without warning, the stairs ended at a large archway. Beyond it was a room unlike any other he had seen, circular, made entirely of mirrors. Floor, walls, even the ceiling. In the center stood a single chair. On it sat a corpse. Jeremy approached slowly. The body was ancient, mummified, dressed in robes stitched with words. The hands were folded around a book clutched to its chest. He reached for the book. The corpse's eyes snapped open. Jeremy screamed and fell back as the corpse slowly stood, bones cracking. The mouth opened and hundreds of voices spilled out, speaking different languages, different dialects, but all saying one thing. You took the quill. Now write the end. The mirrors around the room shimmered. Each one now reflected a different version of Jeremy. One crying, one laughing, one hanging, one burning, one missing his face entirely. The corpse extended the book toward him, and the quill appeared in Jeremy's hand again. He looked at the first page. It was blank, but waiting. Shaking, breath shallow, Jeremy wrote. Jeremy dropped the quill and ran. As the words formed, the corpse collapsed. The quill vanished. A crack formed in one mirror, then another. The room trembled, and a doorway appeared. Jeremy didn't think. He ran through it and found himself in a new section of the library. This one darker, older. The whispering here was deeper, slower, and something moved between the shelves. Something huge. The ground beneath Jeremy's feet pulsed, not unlike the throb of a heartbeat. Every second he stood there, the shelves around him breathed. They expanded, inhaled, then creaked inward again like lungs struggling against time itself. Whatever this new section was, it was alive. and it was watching. The lights here weren't electric. Faint blue flames flickered from sconces nailed directly into the wood of the shelves. They didn't illuminate much, only patches of the long, dark corridor ahead. Shadows moved where they shouldn't. Some even watched him. No sound, not even the whispers. Just a deep, suffocating absence, until he stepped forward. Then they returned, slowly at first, like murmurs in a distant storm. But this time, it wasn't words being whispered. It was laughter. Wet, broken laughter. Children and adults. High-pitched giggles and deep belly chortles. All twisted through a veil of static, like they were being played from rotting cassette tapes. Jeremy quickened his pace. He passed shelves filled with objects now. Not just books. Teeth in jars. Dolls with eyeless faces. Typewriters with still smoking keys. Photographs of people mid-scream. Every item was labeled meticulously with handwritten tags. Subject number 427, removed for defiance. Subject number 0982, collapsed during the transition. Subject number 1235, attempted to scream, unsuccessful. A mirror hung on the far shelf. On its surface was scrawled in grime. "Are you still you?" Jeremy couldn't answer, because he wasn't sure. He passed the mirror without looking at his reflection. His chest was tight, throat raw from the scream that had never escaped earlier. The silence inside him was louder than the whispers outside. Then he saw it, a figure standing at the end of the aisle, motionless, dressed in black robes, tall, unmoving. Jeremy froze. The flames dimmed. The whispers ceased. The figure slowly turned its head, but it had no face, just a flat, smooth surface where features should have been, as if its face had been wiped clean. In its hand, it held a lantern, filled not with fire but screams. Actual screams, bottled like liquid, twisting violently inside the glass. Jeremy stepped back. The figure began to float toward him. Not fast, not slow. Inevitable. He turned to run, but the shelf beside him bent outward, blocking the path. Another twisted behind him, cutting off retreat. The shelves were moving, rearranging, trapping him. He turned and darted into a narrow side aisle, ducking beneath a low-hanging chandelier made of bones. The laughter had returned, now hysterical and echoing from all sides. Something brushed his shoulder. He screamed. But once again, no sound came out. Only air. From the corner of his eye, he saw himself run past. A mirror? No, this version wore different clothes. Its mouth was sewn shut. It didn't see him. Jeremy stood paralyzed. Hallucination? Time echo? Another version of himself, bleeding from the ears, stumbled down another aisle, clutching his head and gasping. He turned a corner and ran straight into another figure. A woman this time. Her eyes were missing. Black holes stared out of her face like empty sockets. "Jeremy," she whispered. He staggered back. Who are you?" She smiled and her teeth fell out. "They called me Cynthia. I wrote my way out. Or tried to." Her fingers twitched, leaving ink smears in the air. "I didn't finish the book." She stepped closer, and her voice dropped to a raspy croak. "Don't let them finish it for you." Jeremy blinked. She was gone. Just like that. Only a single page fluttered down. From above, landing at his feet. It had one sentence written in dark red. "What you forget, they remember." Suddenly, the lantern bearer was behind him. Jeremy turned too late. The lantern was held inches from his face, and the screams inside multiplied. Dozens of voices erupted all at once, battering his mind, crashing into his skull like waves. He fell to his knees, clutching his head. The faceless figure tilted its head in curiosity. Then it reached forward and pressed its flat palm against Jeremy's forehead. A searing pain tore through him. Images exploded in his mind. Old classrooms, childhood libraries, the pages of books he barely remembered reading. His first kiss, his last argument. Every suppressed memory burned through him in vivid, unbearable clarity. Then, silence. The figure withdrew its hand. Jeremy gasped for breath. He was lying on a floor of black tile now. The library was gone. Around him stretched an infinite hall of closed doors. Endless. Identical. Behind one of them, something scratched. Behind another, something wept. Behind the third door to the left, something called his name. His real name. Not Jeremy. Jacob! He froze. No one had called him that since he was 8. Only his grandmother knew. She had been the first to give him a book. A strange one with no title. She told him stories weren't just for reading, they were for remembering. He moved toward the door that called his true name. Each step weighed more than the last, like walking through water. Memories returned in flashes. The old house, her warnings, the whisper that used to come from her attic when he stayed overnight, the books she never let him touch, books that hummed, like this one. He reached the door, placed his hand on it, and it opened by itself. Inside was her library, small, intimate. His grandmother sat in her rocking chair, smiling gently. "Jacob," she said, "you've come home." Jeremy's knees gave out. "Is this real?" he asked, barely breathing. She smiled. "Does it matter?" Behind her, shelves pulsed like veins. The air was thick with dust and memory. She motioned toward a chair. "You've been writing your whole life, you know. You just forgot where you started." Jeremy sat shaking. "I never wanted this." "No one does," she said softly. "But the library chooses, and it remembers, even when we forget." She reached into her shawl and pulled out a book. His book, same red cover, still breathing, still waiting, and beside it, a second book, black cover, locked shut. A faint hum seeped from the edges. "This one isn't yours," she said, "but you can read it, if you're ready." Jeremy stared. His hands itched. The whispers were back, not around him, inside him. Jeremy's fingers hovered just above the black-covered book. It throbbed softly, almost like it had a heartbeat of its own, pulsing in tandem with his breath. He glanced at his grandmother, but she simply nodded, her eyes glassy, far away, as if she were only half there. "Go ahead," she whispered. "But remember, Jacob, once you start, you must never stop reading, or it will start reading you." The words sent a cold tremor through his bones. His fingers brushed the cover. Immediately the world twisted. The room around him bled into darkness, colors draining like ink sucked into a void. His grandmother's smile warped, stretching too wide, and then her mouth fell open with a sickening crack as a centipede of letters crawled out, whispering passages from his childhood diary in voices he barely recognized. He clutched the book tighter, heart pounding. The whispers now came from within it, layered, urgent, taunting, a chorus of lost voices. "Read, Jacob," they chanted. "Read before it remembers more than you." He opened the book. The pages were blank, until they weren't. Lines appeared one by one, ink bleeding into view like veins growing under skin. It described what he was doing, exactly what he was doing, word for word, thought for thought. The book was alive, and it was narrating him in real time. Then it began to get ahead of him. Jeremy stood, the book wrote. He didn't want to, but his legs obeyed. He turned toward the mirrored shelf behind him. There was no shelf, but one appeared instantly, as though reality had been rewritten by the text. And in the mirror he saw not himself, but them. Jeremy turned. His reflection stared back, but it wasn't his face. It was dozens of faces, morphing between each other. A librarian with empty eyes, a little girl bleeding ink, Cynthia, the faceless lantern bearer, his own stitched mouth double. They all stared from behind the mirror glass. The whispers in the book grew louder. He ran. Jeremy sprinted, the book still clutched in his hands. The mirror shattered behind him, and the faces spilled out, laughing, shrieking, calling his name like a choir of fractured memory. He entered the aisle of forgotten words. A door slammed open beside him, revealing a narrow corridor lined with books stripped of their titles. Every spine was blank, every cover weathered. The moment he stepped inside, the air changed. It felt thicker. Something gripped his ankle. He looked down. Hands, hundreds of them, emerged from the floorboards, each holding open books with paragraphs torn out. Pages flapped like wings, trying to escape. The hands didn't try to pull him under. They tried to make him read. Each book begged in broken phrases, "Remember me. Finish what I started." He took my ending. "Write it back." He kicked free, stumbling forward. the hand still clutching at the hem of his jeans. As he reached the end of the aisle, he came to a stone pedestal. On it sat a single book, its cover humming with energy, pulsing like a warning. Engraved in the pedestal were the words, "To write is to trap is to feed is to remain." Before Jeremy could process it, the black book in his hand snapped shut. It let out a hiss like steam from a dying machine, and grew hot, too hot. He dropped it, and it vanished before it hit the floor, consumed by shadows. Something stepped from the end of the aisle. Not a figure, not human. It was tall, impossibly so, bending at the neck to fit beneath the arch of the library ceiling. Its body was made of pages, thin, brittle pages stitched together with sentences in blood. Its arms were quills. Its mouth was a gaping horizontal wound filled with alphabets. "Reader," it rasped. Jeremy couldn't move. "You have taken much. You have given little. The balance must be rewritten." With a screeching noise, the creature extended one quill finger and pointed at Jeremy's chest. His ribs burned. Something beneath his skin moved, shifted, like words wriggling inside his lungs. "You are writing even now," the creature said, tilting its head. "What page are you on, Jacob?" Jeremy gasped, clawing at his shirt. A sharp, cold pressure filled his throat. He coughed, and a page came out. He fell to his knees, staring at the page in horror. It had his memories on it, written perfectly. The first time he saw a ghost, the nightmare he had at 5, the scent of his grandmother's study, the voice he heard in his closet for 3 nights straight when he was 7. Each time, a story. Each time, forgotten. The creature stepped closer. "The library feeds on story. Yours are tasty, very undercooked." Jeremy threw the page aside and ran again. The world blurred. He burst through another set of doors, this time into a massive chamber. The ceiling stretched high above into darkness. A single chandelier spun slowly, lighting shelves that circled outward like rings in a tree. At the center of the room was a podium. On it lay a book larger than a coffin. A voice echoed all around. "Finish the chronicle, and you may leave. Leave it unwritten, and become one of us." All around him, figures emerged from the shadows. People with open mouths but no tongues. Eyes filled with words. Skin like worn leather. Each one carried a pen. Each one had no choice. Jeremy staggered forward. The chronicle opened on its own. Its pages were blank, but not for long. His hands moved against his will, quill appearing once more. Black ink poured from the tip, writing words in a frenzy he couldn't control. He was writing a story that felt familiar. It was about a boy trapped in a library, a boy who opened the wrong book, a boy who forgot his name, his story. He tried to stop, but his fingers wouldn't obey. The ink spread. Words curled around his arms, his chest, branding him with paragraphs. He was becoming the story. He screamed, but no sound came. Then, another figure stepped out of the darkness. Female, elegant, pale, Cynthia. She held a burning page in one hand and a key in the other. "Still writing, Jeremy?" she asked, voice calm despite the madness. His eyes widened. "Help me," she smiled faintly. "You're already helping yourself. You just haven't turned the page yet." She threw the burning paper into the chronicle. The fire caught. The book screamed. The walls trembled. Cynthia grabbed his hand. "Run, while it forgets!" They sprinted toward the opposite wall as the chamber groaned, books tumbling from shelves, laughter and screams rising in a crescendo of chaos. Behind them, the chronicle howled, its pages catching flame, ink burning into smoke that took shapes of people, names, stories, lives. As they reached the last door, Jeremy turned back one final time and saw the creature from before, crumbling into letters. It looked at him with sorrow. "You were my best chapter." Cynthia yanked him through the door. They were gone. The door slammed behind them with a deafening finality, sealing off the screaming of the burning chronicle and the unraveling voices within. Silence returned, thick and suffocating, interrupted only by the desperate gasps of Jeremy and Cynthia as they stumbled into a corridor unlike any they had seen before. This place was quiet, too quiet, not the suffocating, oppressive silence of the other parts of the library. No, this was different. It was a watchful silence. Jeremy bent over, hands on his knees, sweat pouring down his face. His clothes were torn, his hands still stained with ink that throbbed faintly beneath the skin, like veins replaced with haunted paragraphs. "I can't keep doing this," he whispered, barely able to stand. Cynthia didn't answer. She pressed her palm against the wall beside them, which shimmered slightly under her touch. The corridor rippled like water, then went still. "You'll have to," she said flatly, "because it's not over. Not yet." Jeremy pushed himself upright. "Where are we?" "The back stacks," she said, glancing around. "No one's cataloged this section in over a century. It's where lost narratives go to rot. You'll find pieces of books that were never finished, stories abandoned mid-sentence, ideas too dangerous to be told. Why would anyone keep that here?" She gave a humorless laugh. "Because the library doesn't forget, remember? Everything written stays, even the discarded." The corridor stretched on endlessly, lit by weak candlelight that floated through the air like fireflies. There were no shelves here, just towering pillars, each carved with unreadable script. The script moved when Jeremy stared at it, forming shapes, sometimes faces that whispered things he almost understood. They passed one pillar that trembled when he looked too closely. A mouth opened in the stone, spitting out torn notebook papers soaked in blood. Cynthia stopped and turned to him. "You're marked now," she said. "The Chronicle won't stop hunting you until it's rewritten what it lost." "I thought it was burning." "Only a copy burns. The original is buried deeper. What you destroyed was a distraction." Jeremy froze. "You're telling me all of this was just to stall me?" Cynthia's expression darkened. "Not you. Me. I stole something from it. Something it can't recreate. But it's not just after me now. It's after you, too. You've written too much of yourself into its world." Jeremy's pulse quickened. "So what happens if it catches us?" "You become a footnote, a forgotten phrase, a memory on a shelf, endlessly repeated until no one remembers what the sentence used to mean." Jeremy didn't reply. They continued walking. Eventually, they came upon a spiral staircase, wooden, impossibly thin, winding downward into utter blackness. Cynthia didn't hesitate. "Wait," Jeremy said. "Where does it go?" "Down," she replied. "To the editing room." The words sent ice through his blood. "What the hell is the editing room?" She glanced at him, eyes tired but steady. "Where stories are restructured, where endings are rewritten, where people go when the library decides their narrative needs adjustment. And you want us to go there? We don't have a choice. It's the only way to find the master page." He blinked. "Master page?" She didn't stop walking. "Every library has an origin text, the root manuscript that holds the framework of everything else. You can't destroy the library without erasing that. And no one's seen it in decades. Most think it doesn't exist." "But you do." She didn't answer. So they descended. Step after step, the temperature dropped. The air grew denser, laced with the stench of old paper and mold and something deeper, forgotten knowledge, rotting with time. Halfway down, they heard the first voice. It came from the walls. "You never should have opened the book, Jacob." It was his own voice, then, "We told you to leave it alone." His grandmother's voice, then, "What did it feel like? Watching us burn." The voice of the lantern bearer. Jeremy stumbled, clutching the railing as nausea overtook him. Shadows clung to the stairs, winding like ink around his ankles. Cynthia pulled him forward. "Don't listen. It's memory bait. It's trying to rewrite your guilt into obedience." He forced himself to continue. At the bottom of the stairs was a narrow doorway. On it, in chiseled Latin, were the words, "Scriptum est, ergo est." It is written, therefore it is. Cynthia pushed it open. Inside, the world changed. They stood in a circular chamber made entirely of books. The walls were alive with movement, words crawling across every surface, reordering themselves, editing paragraphs mid-sentence. Pens floated through the air like hummingbirds, rewriting stories at will. At the center of the room stood a pedestal. Upon it, a single sheet of pure white paper, glowing softly. The master page. Jeremy stepped forward. "Is that it?" Cynthia nodded. "One page to overwrite them all." As they neared it, a wave of pressure hit them, a psychic force that made Jeremy's vision double. He saw himself at 5 years old, scribbling in a notebook. At 12, hiding stories under his bed. At 16, reading a book that didn't exist in any catalog. Every version of him was watching. Then the air split open. A vertical seam tore into the center of the chamber. From it stepped a figure, not robed, not monstrous. A man, well-dressed, tall, expressionless. His skin was made of parchment, his veins black threads of text. "The editor," Cynthia breathed. The man nodded slowly. "Your draft has exceeded acceptable parameters." Jeremy backed up. "I'm not a draft." The editor raised a hand. "You are a contradiction, a self-aware narrative with unstable plot lines. Correction is required." Jeremy shook his head. "I'm a person." "You were, until you wrote too much of yourself." Cynthia drew a pen from her coat, a silver one, crackling with lightning. "No one's correcting anyone today." The editor smiled faintly. "You stole punctuation, a dangerous game." Then the walls exploded into noise. The books screamed. The chamber fractured. Reality cracked down the center like a broken spine. Pages flew like shrapnel. Quills spun through the air, sharp as blades. The editor stepped forward, untouched. Jeremy lunged for the master page. The editor flicked his fingers. Jeremy stopped midair, suspended, gasping. "You are unwritten," he whispered. But Cynthia stabbed the silver pen into the ground. The spell shattered. Jeremy crashed forward, hand hitting the master page. Everything went white. He heard one voice, his own. "I choose my story." Then, darkness. White. Endless. Consuming white. Jeremy floated, weightless, breathless, voiceless, inside an expanse where time was a forgotten idea. His body felt unshaped, like he had been erased down to a concept, a whisper without form. In the distance, echoes of sentences hung like constellations in the void. Some whispered nursery rhymes, others screamed ancient curses. All of them turned toward him. He touched the master page. He has overwritten the draft. Unacceptable. Impossible. And then, a tug, a sudden, invisible yank, like a leash pulling him back into a body. Breath slammed into his lungs. Gravity returned. He fell. Thud. Jeremy landed hard on a cold marble floor, gasping for air. Above him, the ceiling spun like a carousel of parchment, thousands of pages circling in a storm. He was back in the chamber, but it was different. The books had stopped moving. The editor stood perfectly still, hand half raised, frozen. So was Cynthia. So was everything. Jeremy looked down. The master page was stuck to his palm. But it wasn't glowing anymore. It was bleeding. Black, inky blood that seeped through his skin and soaked into the veins of his hand. The words on the page burned into him, carving a new story into his very being. And it was his. He staggered to his feet. The chamber breathed around him, not as a place, but as a mind, a consciousness, vast and labyrinthine. The library wasn't just a collection, it was a living thing, ancient and hungry, powered by imagination and memory, fed by fear and words. And Jeremy had just touched its heart. Whispers rushed into his ears. "Now you must write." A pedestal rose from the floor, smooth obsidian black. Upon it sat a single quill, hovering, waiting. Jeremy took it. The master page unfolded into infinite sheets, stretching out across the chamber like a river of possibility. He didn't need ink. The quill wrote in memory. His. He wrote of his grandmother, of the first time he saw the hidden stairwell, of the black book that whispered in the dark, of the reflections in the mirror, of Cynthia, of the burning chronicle, of the editor. He rewrote the story not as a victim, but as an author. He chose which horrors stayed, which fears faded. He sculpted reality with every flick of his wrist, and with each word, the chamber changed. The editor twitched. He was waking up. Jeremy had seconds. He reached the bottom of the page and stopped. What now? If he finished it, would it end? Would the library vanish? Would it consume him? Or would he become something else? The editor raised his head. You presume authority, he said, voice thunderous. You presume authorship. But you were never meant to write. You were meant to be read. Jeremy raised the quill again. I choose how this ends. The editor surged forward. Jeremy plunged the quill into the page, and the entire library shattered. The walls fell into words. Shelves disintegrated into letters. Screams, laughter, sobs, all unraveled into sentences that spun into the air like ash. And in the midst of it, silence. Then, Jeremy stood, in a quiet, dusty room. Sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows. A fireplace crackled gently. Books lined the shelves in perfect, alphabetical order. No whispers, no breathing walls. Just a library. His grandmother sat in an armchair near the fire, reading. She looked up, smiled. Took you long enough. Jeremy blinked. Is it over? She tilted her head. Did you finish the story? He turned. On a nearby desk lay a single book. Bound in black leather, no title. He opened it. Inside were pages written in his handwriting. His memories, his fears, his story. The last page was blank. He took a pen and wrote, The story ended when I took control. But some pages still whisper. As he finished the sentence, the final line faded from the paper, absorbed like ink into thirsty skin. His grandmother nodded slowly. You wrote your way out. Most don't. He closed the book. I want to leave. She stood. Then go. But remember, the flames in the fireplace hissed. Never stop writing. It's the only thing keeping you real. Jeremy awoke in a hospital bed. The window to his right was open, and a breeze stirred the curtain. Machines beeped softly. A nurse walked in, startled. Oh, you're awake. You've been in a coma for 2 weeks. He blinked. 2 weeks? Yeah. They found you unconscious in an abandoned library. Nothing around you but a burnt journal and pages stuck to your skin. Jeremy sat up slowly. There was a scar on his hand, the shape of a quill. He smiled faintly. As the nurse left, he turned to the nightstand. A book sat there. Black cover. No title. He didn't touch it, but he could hear it. Whispering. Waiting. The end. Did this story chill your spine? What would you do if a book started writing your thoughts before you even thought them? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We dare you. Like, subscribe, and share for more terrifying tales you won't forget, even if you want to. There are more pages in the dark. Are you brave enough to read them? Let me know if you'd like another original horror series.